What?
Don't give up your day job.
Mark. Andy.
James, my guitar back.
Sorry, well, I just thought, I don't know whether you know, ladies and gentlemen, that Andy Taylor here and Mark Shaw. Andy, of course, world-renowned for being with Duran Duran. Mark for being with Then Jericho. Have got a new band, right?
It's called Then Jericho, yeah. We basically got together and we've reformed Then Jericho together with a whole new lineup of musicians.
And Andy Taylor said he'd help out.
Well, Andy's he's playing the guitar and doing most of the work, really.
Are you?
Yeah. You're not playing the guitar.
I thought perhaps I could get in somewhere.
Well, do we need a makeup girl?
Oh, come on, guys. I wanted to be in a band. I want to be in a band.
I tell you what, you could be head of... head of being important?
Head of being important?
Yeah.
Well, could I do that
You're the
for
manager, you can manage us.
I'm their manager, OK? So a little later on, first time on TV, first time we're going to see the new Then Jericho.
Yep.
Mark Shaw and Andy Taylor.
On the acoustic versions.
On the acoustic versions of some of their new songs. OK, we'll see in a few moments. Do you want to go and rehearse, or are you perfect?
We're perfect.
OK, right. Just before we do anything else, could you hold on to that?
Absolutely.
All the time I've been doing this programme, I wondered what was in this room here. I wonder. I'm not 100% sure what's in here, but lots of noises emanate from here. So this is Michael Lingard, who is in charge of lighting, and that's Mike Mansfield, who's known for doing cue the music, but very little else upstairs. Would you like to cue the titles of the show? OK, now, before we...
I'm ready, James. I'm ready.
No,
Yes, please.
No.
This is my chance.
Jerry, later. Go to the dressing room. You're on later. I'm sorry about that. Please follow me in here. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the programme. Tonight, which camera shall we have? We have so many. On camera 2. Tonight we are talking about, in fact, Whale On is on the age of consent of homosexuality. In this country, we are one of the highest at 21, and we're going to be debating that particular point. And we're one of only 8 countries that has a different age of consent for being heterosexual or homosexual. With me are Will Parry and Hugo Greenhoff, and you have actually done something very interesting. Which is which? Remind me which is which.
I'm Hugo, this is Will.
You're Hugo. Now, Will, you're older.
Yep,
you're 25. You're 20.
20, yeah.
You've been in a relationship for how long?
18. I was 19 when I first met Will. He was 24 at the time as well. We were both breaking the law. We sort of realised, you know, quite soon as we were going out, that, you know, we were both criminalised in our relationship, which was a completely consensual thing.
You're still breaking the law.
We're still breaking the law.
You could go to prison.
I could go to prison for 5 years, and Hugo for 2.5 years if we were actually convicted.
Yet you are old enough at the moment to go and fight. You're old enough to run a business, to vote.
To marry, even. It seems ludicrous that there is such a difference between the heterosexual age of consent at 16 and the homosexual age at 21. Why do they think homosexuals can't, you know, realise their own sexuality?
Why did you decide to answer an advertisement that Stonewall put out for 2 people in your own situation to come forward and actually provide a court case for them? Because you're putting yourselves on the line, aren't you?
Pretty much so, but we realised that this was such a ludicrously anachronistic law that is actually enforced. I think 200 people were arrested for consensual underage sex, as it were.
200 people?
Of which 150 were sentences, and 13 to 15 were actually imposed immediate custody, were sent to prison.
OK.
I mean, were I to be going out with a 20-year-old girl, nobody would bat an eyelid. And yet here we find ourselves in Britain with this ridiculously anachronistic law, which means that I could be sent to jail. I mean, it's completely ridiculous.
You would like to see the age of consent brought down to 16?
Down to 16.
It should be equalised with the heterosexual age.
Exactly, we're not asking for special rights, just equality.
We're going to come back and talk to them a little later on. Ladies and gentlemen, that's what we're talking about. With me, my next guests on the show are a gentleman who's been on the programme before and said to me it's like going into the lion's den, Stephen Green. And Stephen has actually written a book called The Sexual Dead End, and I have been reading this book
Yes, you paid for it,
with
James.
absolute disbelief in some of them, the things that you've written, and also Harry Greenway. And Harry, you, of course, are well known for your views on homosexuality, and we'll talk to you about that in a few moments. Stephen, what do you think about the possibility of the age of consent for being a homosexual lowered to 16?
Well, there's no equality of purpose in British law or in natural law between heterosexual love and marriage and homosexual activity, so it's quite right that there should be a difference between the ages that people are allowed to practice homosexuality. You have to bear in mind that nobody's born like it, and nobody's stuck like it. There's no geneticist who will say anyone's born like it.
So anybody...
So you're talking
sorry,
about things that people have...
my wires come loose. You are actually saying that a person who is a homosexual could actually be cured.
Yep.
It's like a disease.
Well, it's not a disease, but you can say it's a pathology, and you can easily argue that the sort of things that homosexuals do, sexual things they do with each other, are pathological.
You're very keen in your book. Actually, to go through and make the point over and over again that the point about being a homosexual is that you commit acts of anal intercourse.
Well, you call it anal intercourse.
You
the law says buggery, but
Yes,
you want to call it anal intercourse, James. I mean, you see, you have
You
sexual
say, hang on
intercourse
just
and
a minute,
social
Stephen.
intercourse.
Yes, you
so
say in your
anal
book
intercourse could be
sexual
talking out of your
intercourse,
bum,
social
couldn't it?
intercourse.
What?
Social intercourse could be...
No, social intercourse. You had sexual intercourse,
Yeah.
then you had anal intercourse.
Yeah, but you said social intercourse could be talking out of your
No,
bum.
no, anal intercourse could be.
Oh, anal...
couldn't it?
I see, yeah, so... But it isn't, is it?
It isn't.
No.
No,
You
not
go
the way
into
you've used it.
great... I don't know if anybody's read this, but you go into great...
They have, yes.
And you say that people actually feel that they'd like to break the law, they'd like to steal. Some people feel that they'd like to be violent, but the majority of people fight against these feelings, and that people who feel they want to have sex with someone of the same sex should do likewise.
Yeah, because the law has to set a standard, and the law should reflect natural law, which, for me, and in British law, until very recently, has been the biblical law that was, that was handed down to Moses. I mean, the tablets are above the royal courts of justice. You know?
If I want to have a sexual relationship with somebody, if I'm over the age of 16 and he happens to be a man,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
you would say a boy, I suppose, but if you're 16 you can join the army.
Yeah.
Why shouldn't I?
Because well, I'm not saying that that all heterosexual people are normal anyway. But I mean, I had to decide for the sexual dead end whether to include the details of homosexual activity or not.
Okay.
In the end, I put them in, and it could be. I reckon it could be safely said that anyone doing the sort of things I had to describe can't possibly be paddling with both oars in the water.
Well, that's a nice little, I suppose that's humorous, but I gather from the way you have gone into sort of detail in this book that you enjoyed it. You got a bit of a kick out of writing about it.
On the contrary, I was glad when it got out of the house.
You were? Okay. Let me talk to Harry Greenway. Harry, it must be embarrassing for you to sit, I suppose, on a platform next to Stephen, because Stephen represents an organisation called the Conservative Campaign for the Family.
Conservative Family Campaign.
The Conservative Family Campaign, and some people think that has a lot to do with the Conservative Party. Is that right?
They may think that because it has the name Conservative in the title. And it is, I think, an organisation supported by a good many Conservatives.
You would agree with what Stephen says?
Well, it depends what he says, but I agree with him when he says that the age of consent for homosexuals should not be reduced to 16.
What, you think a man of 21 should, I mean, somebody of 20 or 19 or 18 should be precluded from having sex with somebody that they wish to just because of a law?
Well, I think there's a
It's
possible
ridiculous.
case. I mean, I think there's a possible case for reducing to 18, since the age of majority is now 18, and the intention of the Act when it was introduced was to say that people over the age of 21, as adults, have the right to behave as they wish to behave.
But it's
in
over
private
18 now,
and
Harry. I mean,
in
at
consent. Well,
least
there
it
is a
should be
case.
18.
There is a case for it to be reduced to 18 on the very basis on which the law setting it at 21 was introduced.
So you'd be prepared,
There
if
is that
there is a vote,
intellectual case, I
if
think.
there's a vote in Parliament, you would be prepared to actually vote for 18?
I would be prepared to think about it. I'm not sure that I would actually bring myself to do it, but I certainly think there's a case, an intellectual case, which I would want to, which should be properly considered.
Can I ask you, Harry, you have any children?
Yes.
Yeah. If you found one of your children was gay, homosexual, or had tendencies in that way, what would you do? How would you feel?
I think it's a question, it's a hypothetical question. I think that...
No, Harry,
Oh, yes,
it isn't.
it is.
It's a question that could happen to any one of us.
It's a hypothetical question, that, and I am not a judgmental person. It's something I'd have to consider if it arose.
You wouldn't throw them out of the family and ban them forever. Hypothetically speaking, of
My
course.
children are my children. I love
Yeah.
them whatever they are.
Well, give me a hypothetical answer.
No, I don't give you you can't answer in hypothesis.
But you can understand that that might be something that you may have to face at some time, or maybe a grandson.
I would, if you put an hypothesis to me, it is an hypothesis by definition.
Okay, can I ask that question? Stephen is very keen to
It's
answer
for
it.
you.
Very, very quickly, Stephen, if one of your children seemed to have homosexual tendencies, what would you do?
Well, I mean, how would they get those homosexual tendencies? In the absence of a... No. In the absence...
I actually imagine, Stephen, probably that when your children grow up and they would have a fairly repressed sex education living with you, that they might well turn out that way.
I see. Repressed sexuality like mine. Yeah.
Surely it's generic, isn't it, or not?
Generic? What do
Wouldn't you think it was generic?
You mean genetic?
Genetic, rather.
Yes. Well, it's not genetic. I mean, there's no geneticist who's either found a gene for homosexuality or who's found, a genetic abnormality like Down syndrome. I mean, look, put it this way.
Let me just ask
If you
this
want to be
question.
Darwinian, if you want to be Darwinian about it,
Fine.
then every species has to reproduce. So homosexuality is hardly going to be an evolutionary advance. is
Yes,
it?
but homosexuality is something that is found in the animal kingdom quite commonly. And we're talking about laws that basically, the sort of sexual laws that we have now were introduced by Queen Victoria, so they're not very old.
Not very old. They're in Leviticus.
Well, all right. I mean,
they go back
we
donkey's
didn't
years.
have an age of consent.
No. We've always had a prohibition on homosexual activity. You've got to distinguish the orientation from the activity. We've always had a prohibition on homosexual activity in this country.
I have to go and talk to
67.
my honourable member over here, Harry. You won't be one of your friends. Before I do that, just what would you do, very quickly while I'm walking over, Stephen, if you had a son who told you, look, Dad, I'm sorry, but I'm gay, what would you do? Hypothetically, of course, Stephen,
Well,
because I'm sure it would never happen to you.
I believe that parenting, the way people grow up, has a lot to do with this, and I'm prepared to put my money where my mouth is and say that my children will grow up secure in their gender identity.
OK. Jerry, we've had a lot of letters in asking if we could rename you.
Oh, no.
Harpo Hayes, because of your similarity to Harpo Marx. Jerry, of course, is one of the... Where's the cameras going over there? OK. Lovely to see you.
Jeremy's back.
Jeremy's back, of course, and we've... next week, Jeremy, we've got a really interesting thing for you to do on the show, but I'll tell people next week when they tune in. There will be a vote about homosexuality in the age of consent. John Major seems to have chickened out. He was going to Britain. No. I know he's a friend of yours. Don't. Seriously tonight, Jerry. It's a lovely waistcoat, by the way.
Tom Gilby.
What will you be voting for? 16, I hope?
I shall be certainly voting for 18. And I'll probably
Certainly
be
for 18?
Well, certainly for 18, for all the reasons that Harry gave. And I'll probably be voting for 16 as well. Because at the end of the day, there's going to be a lot of people who are quite upset about 16, people who misunderstand it, people who fear that young people are likely to be corrupted by older men. And there's a worry. But again, you have to say to yourself...
Well, they should be educated.
Yeah, I agree. But you see, then you have to look at
What
the
about
logic.
the young girls who have to worry
That's
about
exactly
men? That's
what...
probably more of a worry.
But, James, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Good.
The
sorry.
logic is inescapable. If you want equality, provided young people are protected, whether they're gay or whether they're straight, it doesn't really matter. And I'll probably vote for 16.
What about, Peter Tatchell's on the programme later tonight. What about outing MPs who are gay? How would you feel if there were a number of Conservative MPs that came out and admitted to being homosexuality?
a person's-
I won't tell you who they are at the moment.
I think a person's sexuality is a matter for them. And I don't think it's right or proper that anyone should out anyone as a homosexual or a Freemason or a Catholic or anything else. It's a matter for them. And that's the way it should be. We don't want McCarthyism of any sort.
OK, if you're good, we'll talk to you maybe later or
Okay.
maybe even next week. Thank you very much indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, Jerry Hayes. We have our artist friends from varying art. Where are you from?
I'm from Slade.
You're from the Slade. Where's he from?
Slade as well.
OK, ex-Slade, all right. And what has this got to do with the age of consent?
Forbidden fruits.
What?
Forbidden fruits.
Oh, forbidden fruits. Good. Very nice. Yes, very nice indeed. Right, Stephen. Forbidden fruits. That's all right, isn't it?
Forbidden fruits, they don't look forbidden to me.
Well, no. I mean, it's just it's sort of abstractly talking.
I see.
Quick, before we go into the break, hasn't the time? Oh no, before we have. Sorry, Mark. Before we have then Jericho. Beg your pardon. He's getting very upset about that. I just run this competition. We've got to do something to try and improve the budget. Now, where are you at home? Which camera? Over here? On two. OK, now I want you to enter the competition tonight because we need lots more money. I'm going to include this. It's a little whale keyring, OK? All right, very nice indeed. You could win that, and I've licked it as well. It's worth having now. Ian Stoddard, who won the holiday competition a couple of weeks ago. Well done to you, Ian, from Fife. There is. His name's on the... I don't need to do that. Have a good time. This week's competition, a brilliant holiday for two on the beautiful island of Mallorca. And in Spain, I wonder if that's gathered by Mallorca. The age of consent in Spain is 12. Did you know that?
Yeah, but it's an intensely Catholic country, and he's going to do it anyway.
Oh, right. OK, fine. Which must be... Which must be taken after the 15th of September, which is, of course, a much better time to take it. Let me get on with this. All you have to do is ring the phone number, which will come up on the screen in a few moments, and answer this question. Which English soap opera was based in Spain and did depart our television screens earlier this evening? Next week, we have a big celebrity from that particular soap on the programme as well. Was it A, Coronation Street, B, El Dorado, or C, Brookside? Ring the number now, 0891 900 007. Good. Now, Marky, are you ready? You're not. OK. What's the song you're going to sing? Ladies and gentlemen, now for the first time on British television, the new Then Jericho, featuring Mark Shaw and Andy Taylor, and an acoustic version of Some People. Yeah!
Went down underground and you're lost without a reason. Young girls are making noise, showing all the gaps and grooves. Transistor radio got the best of you for hours. We all need a moral code and a system to abuse. And though I shouldn't want to, it makes me come alive. Pulls and hesitates me, always I'll survive. Baby, some people gotta work for a living. Some people try as hard as they can. And I hope that you can give me an answer, 'cause you keep coming next to me and tell me what I aim to be. All wrong. What a lonely time. Where did you go to? What a lonely time. I went down a Spanish town when the showers hit the Spanglers. Half-crazed Jamaican boys have it out on the streets. Well, crime pays in many ways and the guns are getting loaded. Well, you ain't seen nothing yet, 'cause there's nothing yet to see. And though I shouldn't want you, you make me come alive. Hold and hesitate me, always I'll survive. Baby, some people gotta work for a living. Some people try as hard as they can. And I hope that you can give me an answer, 'cause you keep coming back to me and tell me what I aim to be. All wrong, what a lonely time. Where did you go to? What a lonely time. Hey! Though I shouldn't want you, you make me come alive. Hold and hesitate me, always I'll survive. Baby, some people are at war with their conscience. Some people try to do what they please. And I hope that you can give me an answer, but you keep coming back to me and tell me what I aim to be. All wrong. Some people break their backs for their children. Some people gotta live by their creed. And I hope that you can give me an answer, 'cause you keep coming back to me and tell me what I ought to be. All wrong. Some people blame the world for their problems. Some people got them hard as they can. And I hope could give me an answer, 'cause you keep coming back to me and tell me what I aim to be. All wrong, all wrong. Where did you go to? Lonely time. What a lonely time. All wrong.
Mark Shaw, Andy Taylor and Ben Jericho, and I'm sure we're going to have them back. We're going to have them back on this show later on tonight, and I'm sure we'll have them back in the future. Mark tells me he is the best-looking man in the British pop music business at the moment. Now, before the break, let me just remind you, you could win a holiday for two in Mallorca. All you have to do is tell me which soap opera used to be based in Mallorca. So soon we forget, don't we? So soon we forget. Was it A, Coronation Street, B, El Dorado, or C, Brookside? Ring the number on the screen now. Back after the break. Welcome back. Here we are. Shush. Right. OK, welcome back tonight. We're talking, of course, about the age of consent and why, for homosexuals, is it 21? Before we do that, let's go back to our friends from the Slade.
Slade.
Slade over here. What are you doing?
This is a policeman sticking the boot in.
This is a policeman sticking the boot into an angel?
Well, he's underage, he's Cupid, he's a baby.
He's a baby. Yes, OK, well, that's pretty naughty, isn't it, really? OK, thank you very much indeed for that. Now, my next two guests on the programme tonight, we'll be meeting this gentleman a little later on. He looks nice. He's actually not wound up. He doesn't move until we wind him up later. Peter Tatchell and Avedon Carol, who represents Liberty. Peter, of course, as everybody I'm sure knows, represents an organisation called Outrage, who have a few members sitting in the audience tonight. We'll come and talk to Peter in a few moments. Avedon, why would Liberty be interested in the age of consent?
Well, a lot of reasons. I mean, obviously, it's a matter of personal liberty and personal discretion, and it's none of the government's business, really. There's also the fact that these kind of laws actually penalize consenting younger people for acts that it's actually fairly normal for kids to choose. Well, not kids. I mean, in this case, the kids we're talking about are adult males. And really they are adults. And it just seems ridiculous. This kind of law really exists not to protect anybody, but to impose the kind of anti-homosexual attitudes that I think Steve Green was portraying earlier.
Should there be an age of consent? I mean, is anybody ever too young to have a sexual relationship?
I don't know. I mean, I was raised in such total sexual isolation as a child that I was shocked to ever hear what you had to do to have babies. So I'm sure
it's messy, isn't it?
I would have been very surprised
messy.
if anyone had introduced the subject to me when I was that young. Even so, I mean, when I did do it, it was illegal for me to do it where I came from, where the age of consent was 18, and
where
I
was
was
that?
16, in Maryland, near Washington, D.C.
Yep.
And
different states have different ages of consent.
yeah, it's real confusing. I mean, you actually don't know. In some places, the age of consent is higher than the age for marriage. So.
Really?
I don't. Maybe you're not supposed to do it for the first couple of years.
Peter, what should the age of consent be? I mean, should 16? Do you think that's a good age, or do you think it should be even lower? What would you think?
Well, I think to start with, the number one priority is to get rid of the discrimination against young gay men. It's wrong for the law to require them to wait an extra 5 years before they can have a consenting, loving relationship. So I think 16 is a good start.
Just somebody's talking over in the corner there. Would you shut up while I'm on the air? Thank you very much indeed. I'm sorry about that. I could hear somebody muttering. Peter, when you have the you have a regular kiss-in, don't you, at Piccadilly Circus? I don't know if you've done
Every
that
now
this
and
year?
then.
Every now and then. And people get very offended by it. Wouldn't it be easier for your cause if you weren't so open about it and the people just decided on their own sexuality themselves privately, and then maybe there wouldn't be quite so much fuss?
Well, of course, that would be the ideal, but the sad fact is that lots of lesbian gay people who are living quiet, private lives get investigated by the police, get harassed, get arrested, sometimes get taken to court and even imprisoned.
I mean,
it's our privacy which is being invaded, and so to draw attention to that, we have to make a public statement to let people know there isn't equality in our society, and people who have loving, good relationships are being criminalised unfairly.
But what about, I mean, Hugo and Will, who I talked to earlier, are putting themselves on the line and saying, look, we have a relationship, one of us is underage. Did you lose your, I shouldn't ask you whether you lost your virginity, I suppose, really, but did you have a sexual relationship before you were 21?
Well, most definitely, yes. And I felt very, very angry that the law was saying I wasn't mature enough to make my own decision. I knew from a very early age that I was gay and that I wanted to have a relationship with a man. And I felt it was really, really wrong that by having my first relationship when I was 17, I could have faced 2 or more years in prison.
Why do you think, then, that the powers that be, I hate that term, I hate using that term, why do you think that the politicians
Say
are...
them with a capital
them.
T.
Well, they are only our servants, we must remember. They are there to do our bidding.
Now, hear that.
Why are they fighting shy? Are we, in this country, a majority of homophobics, do you think?
I think, sadly, our society's got a lot of hang-ups about sex in general, even about heterosexuality, but there's a particular hang-up about homosexuality. And it really is absurd when you look at the much more liberal, relaxed attitudes in other European countries. Now, in most other European countries, the age of consent is equal for heterosexuals and homosexuals, and it's usually about 14 or 15.
And you were saying, actually, to me just before we started talking, that it's usually a lot lower in Catholic countries. Why do you think that is?
I think it's partly because a lot of these Catholic countries have historically felt they didn't want to draw attention to the problem. But it is interesting that in Italy, Spain, Portugal, Malta and so on, there is a much lower age of consent, about 14 to 15, sometimes as low as 12.
Now, there's no age of consent for being a lesbian, is there?
Only in a handful of European countries. Most countries have never legislated about lesbianism. So I think it's credible.
Women didn't have sex around.
Well,
women didn't have sexual feelings, so why would lesbians have sex?
I mean, there's a lovely story where, where Queen Victoria was asked, what should we do about this? And she said, don't be silly, it doesn't exist.
Yeah. Yeah, well, the idea was that women weren't supposed to have sexual feelings at all. That's kind of a new idea,
Yeah.
that, you know, and it's quite interesting watching as lesbian magazines have started to come out, that, you know, they're talking about sex in ways that used to be unthinkable for women to talk about sex, and that, for that matter, it was unthinkable for women to talk about sex not that long ago.
Right, take a breath. We're going to come back and talk in a few moments, but let's dash over to the other side of the studio here. Ladies and gentlemen, Garry Jacobs. Now we're running out of time, so let's speed into it. We had lots of letters after your little outburst the other week about sadomasochism. And one comes to us from an M. Brown from Gildercliff, Scarborough, who says, Dear James, I'm writing in response to Garry Jacobs' comments regarding sadomasochism and the recent London murders. Anyone who is able to come to terms with their own sexual needs, however different from our own, and express them safely and privately with other mutually consenting adults is, in my opinion, least likely to commit sexual offences. As Mr. Jacobs clearly demonstrated on the previous programme that he did not appreciate the major differences between fetishism and sadomasochism, he is certainly not qualified to present his own misguided opinions as fact. And would he continue to...
I never present my opinions as fact. They're my opinions.
You just say
and
them
I
strongly, don't you?
still feel that, as a lawyer, the only time I come into contact with sadomasochism is when people are murdering and maligning each other.
Well, they shouldn't do that.
I know.
Some people can do it quite nicely. And,
Absolutely.
So, in a couple of weeks, we're going to do a programme on fetishism.
Well,
will you actually be? Will you be prepared to wear the gear?
Well, I've read Fetish Times today, and I'll introduce my own magazine, Fetish Times. So
Shall we get a? Shall we get a complaint?
There's a lady there. The question.
A friend of mine has built a garden wall. Yes. His neighbour is now complaining about it, even though he was there all the time to watch it being built. Does he have the right to complain?
Well, no, he can complain, but of course he has no legal right to do anything about it if the wall is all on the neighbour's land, and if the wall is no more than 1 metre high at the back of the house, or 2 metres high at a certain part, 2 metres high at the back and 1 metre high at the front. But of course, if it's built on the neighbour's land, he can take the matter to court. He doesn't have to necessarily stop it while it's going on. Gentleman there.
Yeah, I've got a friend whose sister has prevented him from seeing his mother using a court protection order, but he thinks his sister is mentally ill. So what can he do about it?
Well, the Court of Protection, in fact, deals with people's money. If you're talking about preventing somebody from having contact with a relative who is likely to cause them injury or to damage them in some way, then the person, I'm afraid to say, would have to abide by the court order unless they get the court themselves to vary it. It's a very complex issue you're dealing with, very unusual situation. But the question of contact to parents is dealt with under the Children Act, which is a very recent law and very, very clear.
OK, stop. No, we're running out of time.
Oh,
we're running out of time.
God.
We'll have more next week. If you have a problem for Mr. Jacobs, all you have to do is write to MMTV, 5 to 7 Carnaby Street, London, W1, and we will try and put your question to him. But he cannot indulge himself in personal replies, as some people would like.
No. I'm not consenting.
Introduce the band.
The band is what they called?
Then Jericho.
They're called Then Jericho, and they are brilliant. Absolutely.
When you first knew me, you seemed to look through me, love, living as you do inside my world, tortured and battered, but not that it matters now. Every time I climbed upon the hurts, and when I left you, you said to me I'd finally become the thing you'd never want to be. So you listened to me and set the scene for living out of severed doubt. Take my heart and make my day. Make this a lonely world. Come with me and I'll show you the wrong way around. And you'll never feel the same way ever again. Don't ever leave the place I love. 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 Not for a long time. Been fighting a hostile world. Makes it hard to be a better man. When I first met you, the cause and effect you threw took me from the dark into the light. I screamed about her, I had dreams about her, giving up to other love, and everyone would see. So I live without her. That means without another chance of being us. You take her all the way. So now, one of the only few. Come with me and I'll show you a lonely view. And you'll never feel the same way ever again. Don't ever leave the place I love. 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 Don't you leave it. Ow. Don't you ever leave the place I love. Don't you ever leave the place I love. Don't you ever leave the place I love. Don't you ever, don't you ever leave. Don't you ever, don't you ever leave. Ow. Come on, yeah. Come on, yeah. Come on, yeah. Why you ain't happy when you're with me? Child, come on, yeah. Come on, yeah. Come on, yeah. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on.
Thank you. Mark Shaw, Andy Taylor and...
Paul Harvey.
Paul Harvey and Ben Jericho back now. And I understand that there is no record deal at the moment. Why?
Well, we had, or still have, our own record label called Etc. Records. And we were going to release a single and an album under Etc. Records and distribute it through a major. And then Bonnie Ladd here, like, joined the band. And we became Ben Jericho again, and everything changed. And now we are looking for a major deal, and we're going to be touring.
I mean, he's got enough money to finance a deal anyway.
We spent all that. I owe it all the tax, man.
Oh, well, you want to get over there to Cyprus or wherever. Anyway, thank you both very much.
Thank you. We never dig at the Tory party.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Come back and do the show again another time.
Love to.
Great. OK. Ben Jericho back. Just before the break, we're back with the main part of the debate after this. And let me remind you of the holiday competition for Mallorca. Woo! All you have to do is answer this one simple question. Which English soap opera was based in Spain? Coronation Street, El Dorado or Brookside? Ring the number on the screen, 0891 900 007. And lines are open until midnight on Sunday. Come back in a couple of moments. Let's carry on because, of course, we have very little time and all sorts of things to say. Will and Hugo, sitting down here in front, if you've just joined us, let me remind you, Will and Hugo have been an item for how long? Where's that? Are we mic'd up down here, or is the sound man just going to sit? Are we mic'd up over here? Are we? OK, fine.
It's been about 18 months now.
18 months? You were watching the television, weren't you? No, I know. 18 months of being a sort of national celebrity.
Not quite. I mean, as I think Peter said earlier, it needs a lot of publicity to draw attention to what is, in effect, a private matter, because our privacy is being invaded.
But at the moment, you are breaking the law.
We are, because I'm 19, and I was 19 when I first started going out with Will. I'm now 20, and Will's 25. We're both criminalised for something where there is no victim.
Harry, would you like to see them locked away, or would you like to see, what would you like to see done?
Well, you have to... They, by their own admission, know what the law is, and so does everybody else, and unless and until the law changes, you know how things stand. And I think that you know, you have to take, and you are taking account of that in the way you speak about your relationship.
But isn't it bad for them to have to actually go to these lengths, to actually make a sort of public spectacle of themselves and put themselves into the firing line of people not unlike Stephen? There was a member of Stephen's organisation, I think, a Dr. Adrian Rogers, who on a Radio 4 programme wanted the police to come in and arrest them.
No, but they don't have to put themselves in the firing line. They've chosen to do so. Other people...
But nothing...
Other people change the law. What you're seeking, isn't it, by this particular device that you've chosen, is to change the law. Lots of people want to change the law in all directions.
But nobody changes anything,
they don't
Harry,
change it by breaking
does
it.
This.
They change it by persuading people.
Well, excuse me, but I mean the same argument could have been applied to the suffragettes who had to break the law in order to get votes for women. But the real point here is these unreconstructed bigots are actually trying to confuse the issue, because it's irrelevant what Leviticus says. It's irrelevant, totally irrelevant, whether or not gays are born or made. It's irrelevant, as it happens, whether or not gays have a cruisy lifestyle, which means that they have lots of one-night stands, or whether or not they have a long-term monogamous relationship. The real issue is democracy. The real issue is equality for consenting sex. You obviously are not Democrats. Your standards,
because I'm prepared to change the law.
Okay, let me hear a response from Harry.
But I am democratic, and frequently I vote and speak for changes in the law because I'm persuaded of the need for the changes.
But Harry, aren't you
by peaceful and democratic means. And when you say the suffragettes all broke the law, that's not true. Some did, but most did not.
OK, I was going to say, weren't you swayed by the fact that nothing gets changed until somebody makes a stand, does it? Nothing ever gets changed.
I think you can't make a case, in my book, for violent change.
OK, let me ask Stephen.
You have to change by persuasion.
I mean,
making love. What's violent concerned about making love.
It's intellectually violent. It's intellectually violent to try and change the law by breaking it. That's what I'm saying.
OK, Stephen Green. Stephen, you are shaking your head there. You're looking very upset about this. What is the problem? I mean, what our friend at the back there said, surely it's entirely up to individuals what they do in the privacy of their own home.
Or out on Hampstead Heath or on the Common or wherever,
Yes.
on the public conveniences.
Just a minute. Just a minute.
Heterosexuals do not go out looking for sex on Hampstead Heath or in a public convenience.
But I mean,
He said out of his own words.
Just a moment. Heterosexuals do go out and have sex al fresco or in
We're
part.
talking
I've done
about
it myself.
Of orders of magnitude, you know.
You know.
Of course, it is worth pointing out that heterosexuals have more opportunity to do it in other
I'm glad
places.
you've come in, because you represent NCCL, don't you? National Council for Civil Liberties, now called Liberty, which had its own gay and lesbian subcommittee in the mid-70s and early 80s, which had members...
No, we're not going to hear this
Which
now.
had members of the paedophile information exchange
Can we,
on
listen,
the committee.
we're talking...
They affiliated to it.
We're talking about the age of consent.
A paper which wanted the abolition of the age of consent, didn't you?
Yes, as a
Peter
matter of
Tatchell
fact,
has
we
written
don't think people are protected by this.
They're too modest. They're too modest.
Just a minute, hold on, just one moment. If we continue to shout like this across each other, we'll finish the programme and nobody will hear anything.
Well, I was amazed at the NCCL having
Avedon,
paedophiles on
Stephen,
its
shut up.
committees.
Avedon, is Liberty concerned that it scraps completely the age of consent? Because if it does, then surely we're going to get a situation where people can interfere with children, either heterosexually or homosexually, and cause problems.
Child abuse happens now in spite of the law, and it has nothing to do with a law on age of consent. Most people who abuse children are their own parents or close family members. They're not pedophiles. And we're not talking about consenting sex. With age of consent laws, we're talking about whether or not people who themselves do consent are going to be allowed to have their word taken
Good point. So what we're saying is that there is child abuse now, even with the age of consent.
There certainly is, and
doesn't
it's
stop
illegal
Right.
already, you know.
Stephen.
Well, she wants to abolish the age of
Well,
consent.
no, because we've
Okay, publish the paper in that. Just a minute. Just a minute. Let's go back over here. Sorry. Avedon.
No, the issue, I think, is getting very clouded. All we're talking about is the need for equal rights. The age of consent, as it stands at the moment, it's a wider issue than just the age of consent in, say, my relationship with Hugo. As it stands at the moment, it encourages the belief that homosexuals are second-class citizens. It encourages discrimination, and it encourages verbal and physical abuse.
But isn't it fair to say also...
Hugo,
Just a moment. Isn't it fair to say also...
No.
Listen. Isn't it fair to say also that Stephen Green, and we'll come to Stephen in a moment, is trying to paint homosexuals as paedophiles? He's actually trying to make this link between homosexuals and people who interfere with young children.
Not only that, these people are not just amusing sexually repressed Neanderthals. These people are actually dangerous sexually repressed fossils. CFC and Stephen Green has not just been campaigning for us not reducing the age of consent. He's actually been calling for the complete criminalisation of homosexuality.
Is that right, Stephen, over
Yes,
here?
this
Do
is
you
absolutely
want homosexuals to be criminals? Do you want them to be locked up if they admit to being homosexuals?
Well, I'll tell you this. The 1967 Sexual Offences Act didn't achieve what the people who framed it wanted it to. They wanted it. They wanted it to help.
As the audience said, Stephen,
give me a moment.
No, come on, Stephen. We've run out of time. Would you like to see it criminalised, yes or no? It's a simple question.
Look, you're talking 25, 30 years on. It didn't do what it wanted to do.
Stephen Green has said many times that he wants all homosexuality banned in all circumstances, whether the person is aged 16 or 60.
But these
and
things are of
his
their
agenda
time and place.
is to drive about 10% of the population of this country
where's the 10%?
underground.
Hang on just a minute. Let me come to the guy right up at the back here.
Yeah, I mean, the reactionary bigots like this guy here always hide behind things like moral panics about paedophiles, coming from all over the place because of age of consent laws being
How old
reduced.
Are you?
I'm 18.
Have you had a sexual encounter?
Yes, I have, and the fact is that at the moment, right, because of laws like this, I am supposedly breaking the law for going to bed with my boyfriend. This is supposed to be a democratic society. What's democratic about that?
I mean, how can you feel hostile? A nice guy. I mean, he's not going to hurt anybody. He's not going to come after you. Why?
That he will find healing and progress into heterosexuality.
He will what?
That he will find healing and progress into heterosexuality.
You think he can be healed?
Of course he can.
How?
Look, even at the time the Wolfenden Committee was discussed, there was a paper by the BME cataloguing 14 people who've progressed from homosexuality into heterosexuality.
Lady up at the back. Lady
in a pre-Wolfenden.
Lady at the back. Do you wish to be cured?
No. But it's a simple fact.
Of individual choice.
But when it
She
comes
does
down
hang
to
on
it, you
me.
talk about people as if they're sort of immature and incapable of making their decision.
Yeah,
In
that's
fact,
right.
it's the very reverse. The fact that some of us have the guts to actually challenge prejudice people like you.
I'm not
challenge
prejudiced.
the
I've
laws
spent
as they
7
are,
years
and
researching
stand up
the
for
evidence.
homosexuality.
Stephen, let's
Shows
not
that we've
indulge
got
in
a certain
fantasy.
sense
Hang
of
on.
maturity.
Okay. Harry, I just want... Harry, thank you. Harry, would you like to see... Hand on your heart. I know you're a committed Christian and you feel that in the Bible it says we should turn away from this sort of thing, I know. Would you like to see homosexuality totally outlawed and it made illegal and against the law? Yes or no, if you
I
can.
accept the law of the land, and the law as it stands takes a position
Yeah,
in
but would
relation
you- I
to
know, but
homosexuals
would you like to
over
see
the
it-
age of
But
21.
the law can be changed.
Of course the law can be
To
changed,
what?
but
What
I
would you
accept
say
the
it
law.
should be changed to?
I think I have to accept the law.
No, but if you
as
did-
I
can
say
we talk
everybody else does.
hypothetically,
I
Harry?
think it is. I think it is. I think
Could
it is
we
wrong.
talk hypothetically?
No, I
Go
don't
on.
need to talk hypothetically. I don't want to talk
Right, tell me what
hypothetically.
you're
I
going to say.
think
You
it
think the law is wrong?
I think it is wrong.
You think it should be down to 18, the same for both?
I think, no, homosexuality is wrong. That's
But
what
what
I
should
think.
No, I mean, but should it be... We're getting there. Hang on,
But what
hang on,
should
we're
the
getting
law
there.
say?
Should it actually be illegal?
The law is established.
Well, yes, you're right. I mean, should it continue to
The
be illegal,
law
if you like?
is established that over the age of 21, what people do, including male adults and female adults for that matter, in private, is their business.
Do you think that should be their business?
And that I have to accept. I think it is wrong. I think it is sinful.
All right.
But I have to accept that.
Peter Tatchell.
It's
Yes, I
incredible
do.
that a Conservative MP can sit here and support this unjust law. The core of Conservative
unjust about
philosophy is that individual rights are respected and that people have freedom of choice. What this law does is take away those individual rights and take away that freedom of choice.
No,
what
you're
we're
demanding
saying
rights
is
that you've never
everybody
had, that
should
nobody's
have
ever had.
equality
Yes,
and be
but-
treated equally. And I'd ask you, when
You're
you were pressed
demanding
earlier...
rights, Peter, that people have never had, and
when you
you're
were asked,
standing
if you let
the
me-
argument on its head.
If you let me finish,
Yes.
when you were asked earlier about how you'd react if a son of yours was gay, that's the key issue. What this law does is treat tens of thousands of otherwise law-abiding young gay men as criminals. They come from law-abiding families, they are treated as criminals and face up to 2 years in prison
Stephen,
for consenting
would you...
behaviour.
Yeah, okay,
I'd
Stephen,
ask all parents to think about
Right.
that. Would they want their kids to be
Okay.
treated in this way?
Stephen, would you be offended for people in the street, people in the studio, anything like that, to start kissing each other of the same sex?
If you think of the sort of stunt that I...
No, I'm just asking the question. I haven't thought about it at all.
Are, you know, then, yes, I find it offensive. So do millions of other people, and that is why the people... That is why the people... Okay. Yeah. And that is why people convicted of those things are normally convicted of behaviour which would cause a breach of the peace.
All right, as you can hear, the music is coming up. I'd like to leave one last word with Harry Green. Okay, Harry Greenway. Harry, will you be trying to do something in government you can play the grounds, we're going to have to go in a few moments. Would you like to, if you could, be able to change the law? Would you help change
I would
the
not
law?
be
You
seeking
won't?
to change the law personally,
Okay.
no. I would, but I will listen to any argument that's put to me. I think any democratic person has a duty to do that. As a member of Parliament, I will listen. Doesn't mean to say that I'll be converted to a view, but I will listen. And I'll
Okay,
think
we're going to
about
be back
what is
next week with another programme. Until then, thank you very much indeed. This will carry on.